بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين. اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا أصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. نويت تعلم وتعليم والنفع انتفاع تذكر تذكيرا والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وادعو على الهدى ذات الخير ابتغاء وجه الله. Okay. So, and in this class, the other thing I'd like to do is I want to go over some of the shama'il that Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi taught us, because he covers some of the adab of eating and drinking. So again, I'm taking from the Risālah of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, and also I'll take from the Shama'il class that Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi taught us. So he says, rahimahullah, he says, باب في الطعام والشراب وإذا أكلت وشربت فواجب عليك and تقول بسم الله. So, meaning it's a confirmed sunnah that if you're eating or drinking to say Bismillah, jahran, out loud. ولا تزيد الرحمن الرحيم. So the Malikis say not to say الرحمن الرحيم. وتناولوا بيمينك, and to take, as all of you know, to take with the right. And eating with the right is ala jihat al-istihbab. So it's, in the commentary he says it's a recommended sunnah to eat with the right, and I also have in my notes that it's a confirmed sunnah. So in any case, it's not a wajib. So it would be discouraged to eat with the left hand. So it's not as strict as in some of the other madhahib. It's actually wajib to eat with the right hand. And then فإذا فرغت من الأكل والشرب فلتقل الحمد لله. And if you are done with eating, then say alhamdulillah sirran. So subhanAllah, he says to do it silently. And he says in here that one of the secrets of saying alhamdulillah silently is if somebody else is eating with you, that they may want to eat longer, and so to do it silently, that's so they don't feel embarrassed that, oh, okay, I'm still eating and you're done eating, subhanAllah. So there's just so much adab, even in something as subtle as this. And mashallah, it's just the believers always remembering Allah Ta'ala and always trying to do the sunnah. And so he says, in the commentary, he says, وَرَدَ فِي الْحَدِيثِ زِيَادَةٌ عَلَى التَّسْمِيَةِ وَبَارَكْ لَنَا فِي مَا رَزَقْتَنَا أو بارك لنا فيما رزقتنا. So he says there's addition, some more words mentioned in the hadith that you can say وبارك لنا فيما رزقتنا, and bless what you have given to us as provision. وإن كان لبنا يزيد على ذلك وزدنا من وما كان لبنا يزيد على ذلك وزدنا خيرا منه. So if it's not milk, then you can add وزدنا خيرا منه, and give us better than it. Meaning, so the first thing is to say the Bismillah, right? And the Malikis wouldn't say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And to say وَبَارِكْ لَنَا فِي مَا رَزَقْتَنَا, and bless for us what you have provided for us. And subhanAllah, a lot of times we'll say, does this thing may have may it have barakah, may it be blessed. And Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi, who's very strong in his aqidah, he talked about what barakah means. Also, just really quick, on whoever's on live stream, can you actually read the slide? Is it okay to read? So just maybe you can send me a quick text so I know if the green's not too bright. But what Sheikh Hassan said about barakah, there's two ways you know if something has barakah. One, for example, how do you know if a book has barakah? One is if you, like the scholar, completed the book. So that's outward barakah, hissiyan. So a lot of people will write stuff, subhanAllah, and it doesn't get completed. Two, there's barakah ma'nawiyan, meaning, for example, once the book is read, how many people actually commented on it. So subhanAllah, the Risālah of Ibn Abi Zayd, this has a lot of commentaries, mashallah. Ibn Ashar has a lot of commentaries. How many people actually use it? Right, I'm sure there's a lot of other texts that were written, probably, I'm sure even in the Maliki school. Some are just more, they may not be they may not be used as much, in the Muslim world. But these books like the Risālah, Ibn Ashir, Al-Akhdari, Mukhtasar Khalil, which is the fatwa of the madhab, they're used a lot, and that's an indication that something has barakah in it. So the way is, so if ta'am has barakah in it, if food has barakah in it, then it will benefit you. And one of the things that I remember Sheikh Hamza had mentioned is when you're eating food, to intend shifa, that it's a shifa for you. And sometimes if I have presence of mile, I'll also intend, Ya Allah, may the food have, my body has a right over me, so I'm eating to, because this body has a right, and it's an aman, it's a trust with us. So we're not allowed to take our own lives. We're not allowed to harm ourselves, our bodies. So, there's a lot of intentions one can make. And so if the food has barakah, then it won't harm the person. SubhanAllah. And inshallah, when we go to the section of qada al-haja, taking care of the need, and that's what the Arabs would call when they would use the restroom. And that's also adab to these kind of things, like using the restroom and all that, to actually use kinaya, to not speak of them directly. Inshallah, we'll talk about the dua to do, because one says, Alhamdulillah, after one has come out of the restroom, right? Alhamdulillah alladhi, there's a dua that we were taught. SubhanAllah, one remembers it when one needs to. It's just, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah alladhi athqani ladhatahu, abqa fiyya quwwatahu, adhabani adahu. That's the dua. Inshallah, we'll do it again when we get to that section. That we're grateful that that we benefit by the food, and there was strength. I mean, the strength and power is only by Allah and with Allah, and that we were not harmed, whatever harm there was in the food, that was removed. That's part of the dua that we make after we use the restroom. So if food has barakah in it, then inshallah it won't harm us. So that's one of the many meanings of barakah. So barakah, depending on what you're asking to bless, like they'll tell when somebody gets married, they'll say barik lakuma. So that's they're making dua for their marriage to be blessed, that they do things according to the sharia, and there's sakina in the marriage and things like that. So barakah is sort of its meaning is contextual. Okay, so he says if you're eating anything other than milk or drinking, then you would say barik lana fima razaqtana wa zidna khayran minhu, and give us better than it. But if you're drinking milk, you would say Bismillah, Allah barik lana fima razaqtana, but you wouldn't say at'imna khayran minhu. Don't give us better than it when you're drinking milk. You don't say that, because there's nothing better than milk in terms of food. The scholars considered that the best thing, the best food, organic, unpasteurized milk. So So when you're drinking milk, you would say Bismillah wa barik lana fima razaqtana wa zidna minhu, and you would say, give us more of it, more of milk. And subhanAllah, on the Isra al-Mi'raj, the Prophet ﷺ was given two choices, the choices between milk and wine, and the Prophet ﷺ chose milk, and that was the fitrah. He was told that's the fitrah. And alhamdulillah, because he chose wine, his ummah didn't incline. We are inclined towards fitrah, right? The inclination to do the right thing. And there's the hadith about all children are born on fitrah, and abawahu kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra wa abawahu yuhawidanihi or yunasiranihi or yumajjisanihi, or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All newborns are born on fitrah. And then it's the parents that make them either Jews or Christians or Magians or any other religion. Even Muslims grow up with all this culture, and a lot of it's culture, and it's not the deen. So fitrah, they say, is that it describes that inclination to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And, because we bore witness in the unseen world that Allah was our Lord. Alastu bi rabbikum, right? Am I not your Lord? Qulna bala, we said, indeed you are. So that's there in the heart, and the pure nafs will incline towards that. And so many people who've become Muslim, or people who've come back to the deen, they'll bear witness to that. So that's fitrah. And it's interesting that the only thing in the Quran, what is the only thing that we're told to make dua for increase? Waqur. We're asked for increase, for knowledge, right? وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, right? وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, Surah Taha. And subhanAllah, it's interesting that one of the interpretation, we'll get to the section, inshallah, I think it might be the next section. He has a whole section on dreams, and so when a person has a true dream and they see milk in a dream, they say it's a sign of knowledge, subhanAllah. So it's interesting how, outwardly it's the best food, and there's nothing better than it. And so the dua is actually different. Alhamdulillah, Bismillah wa barik lana fima razaqtana. And when we say wazidna minhu, and give us more of it, that's milk, subhanallah. And knowledge, and milk is a metaphor for knowledge. And Allah Ta'ala says, to ask for increase in knowledge, and that it's assumed that it's beneficial. The knowledge is beneficial, subhanallah. So, there's that hadith of dunya mal'una wal mal'una fiha illa al-alim aw muta'allim aw ma wala, or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The dunya is mal'una, meaning removed from the mercy of Allah. We took this last time, right? La'natullahi, when we talked about the hadith of the people that do tattoos, and that they're removed from, their distance from the mercy of Allah. And so this is a similar hadith. This is ism maf'ul for Arabic students. Similar hadith, dunya mal'una. This dunya, so this material world, is mal'una, is removed from the mercy of Allah, except the alim, right, the scholar, wal muta'allim, and the seeker of knowledge, the one who's learning, wa ma wala, and whatever's associated with it, right? So if somebody doesn't want to be a student of knowledge, they should assist the scholar or the student of knowledge in some way, subhanAllah. SubhanAllah. Okay, so Bismillah is confirmed sunnah. Eating with the right is either recommended or confirmed sunnah. And then he says licking the fingers before touching anything. Sheikh Muhammad, when he was doing the Shama'il, he said, this is something you don't want to do unless people are familiar with it, because people might think, he said people don't necessarily do it properly. So he said, you wouldn't stick your finger into your mouth. You would do it and the way he showed it to us is, how if you have meat left on the bone, like if you're eating a bone, you have meat left on it, and how you would take the meat off. One wouldn't stick the bone inside the mouth. You would the way you would bite the meat off, that's how you would lick your fingers if you had any food left. SubhanAllah. And And the Prophet ﷺ actually, speaking about bones, there is a hadith that reports he actually ate with two hands. There was a bone that had meat on it, and he used his two hands. So if you need to use both hands for something like a bone, don't think that it's against the sunnah. So he said that again in the Shama'il, Sheikh Muhammad mentioned that you don't want to put people off the sunnah, and especially if one doesn't know how to do things. So these kinds of things, you would only want to do them in front of people, because it's really important to not put people off. خاطب الناس بما what's the hadith? Address people with what they know. Do you want that they disbelieve in Allah and His Messenger, or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And that actually might be a saying from a Sahabi. Allahu alam. So we need to talk to people according to what they know. So especially in these recommended things, one has to be careful. Like one of my teachers said, he said, there's a hadith about if the fly falls into your food, right? On one side of the wing is the disease, on the other side is the cure. So you dip it further, right, into your drink, and then you bring it out. And so he says things like that you don't want to tell the new Muslim, right? Because it's a difficult thing, subhanAllah, to adjust to. So okay, so alhamdulillah, recommended silently, licking fingers, to eat 1/3. Okay, so the sunnah is actually eat just what keeps your back straight, right? And that's mentioned in the hadith, luqaymat, so a few morsels. But mashallah, I'm certainly not there. But if one has to eat more than that, then to not eat more than 1/3. And subhanAllah, he mentions in here not to take another bite till one's completely done with the previous bite. And the sister who taught me hijama, she also talks to people about nutrition. She's taken a class. MashaAllah, she's very knowledgeable in nutrition also. And she says, she'll tell people that Allah Ta'ala didn't put teeth, He didn't create teeth in the stomach. So the teeth are in the mouth. So one should really chew one's food well. And they mentioned that. وَلَا تَأْخُذْ لُقْمَةً حَتَّى تَفْرُغَ الْأُخْرَى. Luqma is a morsel. Right? And in the hadith it's mentioned it's enough to have luqaymat. Luqayma is a small morsel. Like it's tasghir for this Arabic students. Luqayma, right? Umayra, right, is small for umrah, umayra, the little umrah, basically. So don't take a luqma until you're done with the previous one. And if you're eating with another, eat what is closest to you. Right, and the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, and subhanAllah, there's a beautiful hadith about him teaching one of the Sahaba that when you eat with what's in front of you, and say Bismillah, and there's a hadith about barakah descending over the center, subhanAllah. So it's a good thing to teach children that sometimes, especially when one's hungry, one might dig into the center. The adab is to start from what's closest to you. And it's, when you think about it, it's a lot more beautiful if you take just what's in front of you. There's a lot more restraint than to just dig into, they'll say dig in. So, okay, if you're going to dig in, then just dig, starting from what's closest to you. SubhanAllah. And before I forget, one of the other things Sheikh Muhammad mentioned in the Shama'il, he said if you're inviting guests to your house, the adab is to bring the food to them, to not call them to the food. SubhanAllah. And Sheikh Samad actually mentioned there's an ayah in the Quran where the guests, the angels that actually come and eat, they come to one of the Prophet's homes, and he says the adab of how to deal with the guests, they're mentioned in that ayah, in those ayahs. SubhanAllah, it's not coming to me, the surah, but he mentioned those. There's just a few ayahs, the food is brought to them and they're fed with whatever's in the house. So a lot of times we don't want to invite guests, and there's a lot of barakah if you invite guests, because as the guests leave, as we've been taught, the host's sins are removed as the guests leave the home. I used to say, as a guest leaves, they leave with the sins of the host. And people misunderstood me. But I was like, I mean, it was sort of a literal translation from the Arabic. What it means is that it's so quick that, subhanAllah, as the guests leave, the person's sins are wiped out. And a lot of times we don't want to invite people because we're not doing the sunnah of just feeding them with whatever's in the house. SubhanAllah. So that is another thing he mentioned. And he mentioned that one of the most beloved plates to the Prophet ﷺ, as mentioned in Shama'il, is the plate that had the most hands in it. And he was never known, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to eat from his own plate. SubhanAllah, it's incredible. And there's actually in the Shama'il, they mention the name. They actually have a word for this type of plate. Inshallah, if I can find it. Oh, it's called wala fi sukurrujatin. Sukurruja is translated as a small bowl because it's the small bowl that you'll have for yourself. And he in this hadith, in the Shama, he says, "Ma akala Nabiyyu sallallahu alaihi wasallam ala khiwanin." So he didn't eat on a table. Wala fi sukurrujatin, wala khubiza lahu muraqqaq. So he didn't eat on a khiwan, which is a table. This a khiwan is a type of table now that, they have it in Morocco in certain places where you can eat on the floor. It's low. It's a low table. And so that came, they say it's a bid'ah. A lot of people talk about bid'ah. It's a bid'ah that came after the Prophet ﷺ, where they were still eating on the floor, but the table, they would eat on the table as opposed to just spreading something on the floor. Wala sukurrujatin, not in a small bowl, because that he would be eating by himself. Wala khubiza lahu muraqqaq, and thin round bread was never made for him. When they were asked about in the hadith right before this one in the Shama'il, they say, one of the Sahabiya, she narrates, the hadith is from her. She says, she was asked, did you have manakhil? Manakhil are sieves or sifts. هل كانت لكم مناخل على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم؟ قالت ما كانت لنا مناخل. We didn't have sieves. كيف كنتم تصنعون بالشعير? What would you do with the sha'ir, which was barley? Because barley at the time was cheaper than wheat. So she said, رضي الله عنها, كنا ننفخه فيطير منه ما طار ثم نعجنه. كنا ننفخه. Nafkha, right? The blow. The nafkha on the Day of Judgment is the blowing. And when nafakha fi sur, right? Blowing of the trumpet. She said we would just blow it. They would just blow the chaff. فَيَطِيرُ مِنْهُ مَا طَارَ. So whatever was able to be blown would blow. ثُمَّ نَعْجِنُهُ. And then we would just make dough from it. And the Prophet ﷺ had lost a couple of his blessed teeth at Uhud. And so it would be difficult for him to eat. But that's what he ate, subhanAllah. And that's such a mercy because there's people who can't get soft bread. And so they know that their Prophet ﷺ ate. This is what he ate, subhanAllah. And Sayyidah Aisha, she would, when food was brought to her, she would cry. And she would say, Rasulullah, ma shabi'a Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam min khubz al-sha'ir yawmayn mutatabi'ain hatta qubida. That Sayyidah Aisha said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wasn't satiated from khubz, the bread of sha'ir, barley bread, because again, it was cheaper, yawmayn mutatabi'ain, 2 days in a row. SubhanAllah. And she says, and in the hadith right before it, she says that, so Masruq, he was a tabi, I don't think he was a sahabi. He said, I came about Sayyidah Aisha, فَدَعَتْ لِي بِطَعَامٍ. She called him to food. وقالت ما أشبع من طعام فأشاء أن أبكي إلا بكيت. Every time I'm satiated from food, and I wish to cry, but I cry. Like I cry every time I'm satiated from food. قال قلت لما, and I asked her why, and she said أذكر أذكر حال التي فارق عليها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I remember the state in which the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم left, meaning he left this world. فارق عليها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدنيا. So when he left this dunya, when he parted from this dunya, what was the state? والله ما شبع من خبز ولا لحم مرتين في يوم واحد. He wasn't satiated from bread and lahm 2 days, مرتين في يوم واحد, twice in a day. So if he had khubz and lahm and meat, meaning red meat. When the Arabs say meat, they mean red meat. They don't call dajjaj, they don't call chicken red meat. 2 days in a row. 2 times in a day, subhanAllah. And they talk about how the Prophet ﷺ would sleep يبيت الليالي متتابعة طاويا هو وأهله لا يجدون عشاء وكان أكثر خبزهم خبز الشعير. In the same hadith, just a few hadith before, it says the Prophet ﷺ يبيت الليالي, he would spend the nights متتابعة, like one after another. طاويا, يطوي means to fold, so طاويا meaning he was sleeping without eating dinner. هو وأهله. أهل, generally the Arabs, when they would say أهل, they would mean the wives. Even now they'll say كيف أهلك. It's just adab to not say wife, so they'll say how's your family, and they generally mean your wife. لا يجدون, him and his wives, they were sleeping without eating dinner. لا يجدون عشاء, and they didn't find, there was no عشاء. عشاء is dinner. وكان أكثر خبزهم خبز, and most of what their bread was خبز الشعير. So it was barley bread, because again it was cheaper. SubhanAllah. That was just incredible. And again here another hadith, ما شبع آل محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet ﷺ's family was not satiated on khubz al-sha'ir, on barley bread 2 days in a row, until the Prophet ﷺ passed away. SubhanAllah. And Sheikh Muhammad mentioned that if you're going to eat bread, to not cut it with a knife. It's not haram, but the adab is to break, like they'll say even in this country, break bread, right? So the adab is to break it with your hands. I usually, if somebody will do it with the knife, I don't say anything, but if I'm, sometimes you get the big Afghani bread and people will cut it and they'll freeze it. The adab is to actually break it. And Sheikh Muhammad was saying the adab is to eat bread than rice. SubhanAllah. And they mentioned that there's no, apparently the Arabs didn't have rice until 100 or 150 years after, either after Hijrah or actually after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So they didn't have rice, SubhanAllah. It was not known in the Arab world. SubhanAllah. And he praised, Ne'mal idam, that the Prophet praised vinegar. What a blessed condiment it is. Okay, so we're running out of time, so let me mention some of the other things. Let me go to the next slide. Is the slide readable? The green slide? It's hard to read? Oh, okay. Let me see if I can do one thing here. Let me do this. Just really quick. It's interesting. I noticed this last time. It was fine. Let me just change the color really quick. Is that better? I'll do it for the next one. Okay. Okay, there. Okay, so Bismillah, only confirm Sunnah, eating with the right, recommended confirm Sunnah, licking fingers before touching anything, Alhamdulillah, recommended silently, to eat 1/3, not to take another bite, till completely done with previous bite. If eating with another, eat what is closest to you. Barakah descends over the center. Okay, if you're eating dates and the like, to take from anywhere in the plate, because dates are, they're or apples or anything like that, things that are food that is individual. But if it's like the whole, if you have like if it's all one food, then you want to take from what's in front of you. And the Prophet ﷺ, they mentioned in the Shama'il, I'm taking again from Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, that the Prophet ﷺ ate, he was very hungry and he once ate dates squatting. And so, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ had perfect control over his hunger. And so it's an indication that it's fine to eat like that. In fact, I'm not in front of the camera, but Sheikh Sadiq showed us the different ways to eat. If you want to do the sunnah, squatting is actually makruh to eat squatting. So if one wants to eat, one of the ways is to eat like one sits when one sits in the salah prayer, to sit like that, in the salah, the tashahhud, or to sit with, sitting on, sitting with one leg up, so one leg planted so that the foot is planted on the ground and the other one folded. That's another way also. That would be a sunnah. Or if one wants to eat squatting, that would be okay. One has to also be really careful about the adab and the people one's eating with, so one doesn't want to put them off, because people may not be used to it and they may not be comfortable with that. Okay, next slide. Makruh to breathe into water when you're drinking. لا تتنفس في الإناء عند شربك. So don't breathe, he says in here. It says la, but the la is, it's understood to mean karaha, that it's makruh. So when don't drink and breathe into the drink. So take a sip. Sheikh Muhammad Yaqubi, he talked about it. He said, take a sip, let your body get used to the temperature. Move the drink away, breathe, and then take another sip. Move the glass away, breathe. Do that 3 times, and then after that you can drink more. He said one of the wisdoms of that is that if the temperature of the drink will be different from yours, generally, and so you're getting your body accustomed to the temperature, so it doesn't shock the liver, because he said if that's done a lot, it could harm the liver, and depending on somebody's temperament. So is in the, and he mentions a hadith here, is شرب أحدكم فليتنفس 3 مرات فإنه أهنى وأمرأ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So again, the hadith need to be interpreted, because if you look at the outward of the hadith, it would mean that you're breathing in the drink, but what's understood from the hadith is you're breathing away from the drink. So he says don't breathe into the drink. And to not make sounds. There's a hadith about not making sounds. كَصَوْتِ الْبَهِيمَةِ لِنَهِهِ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. The Prophet ﷺ said to not make sounds when you're drinking. And unfortunately, in our culture, people will drink very hot tea and then they'll slurp it. And it's just, especially once I learned about the sunnah, I've been trying to correct people. But that kind of stuff is very anti-sunnah. كَصَوْتِ الْبَهِيمَةِ. So it's making the sounds of a beast. Bahima is a beast. Okay, and the hadith about washing hands after meal, if there's oil or fat on them. So if, subhanAllah, there's a hadith about the Prophet, he once had oil on his hands and he wiped his feet with it. And I was like, subhanAllah, just the Prophet not wanting to waste any blessing. And they say in the Shama'il that the Prophet عظمت النعمة وإن دقت, like he would aggrandize, he would consider great a blessing, even if it was a minute. Like all blessings are great, but if it was a minute blessing, even a piece of bread. And so he didn't want to waste that. And in fact, I don't know if I mentioned that in the Shama'il, they say the Prophet ﷺ loved the food that remained at the bottom of the plate or the pot, unless you don't eat if if it's burnt. That's the only thing. If you're like me and you tend to burn stuff when you're cooking, you don't eat that. But if it's not burnt, eat it and make the intention of the sunnah. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are by intentions. Inshallah, you'll get the reward of doing a sunnah. And inshallah, by us doing that regularly, it'll increase us in love with the Prophet ﷺ, especially in Ramadan. You know, they say that have a Ramadan where the Prophet ﷺ was with you all the time, meaning in our hearts. And that's, you know, one of the ways to do it is whatever we're doing, we're remembering Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So they talk about the hikmah and the shama'il. Well, the commentators talked about, okay, why did the Prophet ﷺ love what was at the bottom of the pot? And they say probably for two reasons. One, it was tasty. And the second reason, because it's something that typically that people will throw away. And they say that one of the causes of affluence is not wasting. It's not wasting. Because it's a type of gratitude to not waste even the smallest of things. And anything that's going to be against the sunnah, there's going to be less barakah in it, right? So if you want increase, right? Increase is even if you have a small amount, but it goes a long way, that's barakah, right? So anything that's a sunnah, it will, and if we do, in whatever action that we're doing, we do the sunnah in that action, because every action that we do has a sunnah for it, then it'll be blessed. In fact, subhanAllah, we grew up with the sunnah of, and I didn't know this until Sheikh Muhammad actually mentioned that there was a hadith about if bread fell on the floor, we would put it to our eyebrows. And he mentioned to put it to the eyes. And the Prophet ﷺ did that. And say that Aisha commented on it, and he talked about that, and that how if a blessing leaves, meaning if it leaves a person, it's difficult for it to come back. So we don't want, alhamdulillah, whatever blessings that Allah has given us, that we should, part of our gratitude for those blessings is not to waste them. Right? The scholar says there's a hadith that the best dua is alhamdulillah. And the scholars commented on that. Why is alhamdulillah the best dua? So sometimes I can't think of any dua, right? Just say alhamdulillah. They said because if somebody gives you something, just somebody from creation gives you something, and you say you're grateful to them, if they're a person of honor, they're a person of karam, of honor, they'll increase you in that. They're encouraged to give you more. So they said, what about Allah Ta'ala if you're grateful for what He's given you? And alhamdulillah is on the tongue, but there is gratitude. There's shukr with the limbs, right? And part of that is not wasting what we've been given. And Allah, we're in an age, and we're in a lot of us in countries where there's a lot of food, and there's a lot of affluence, and there's a lot of wasted. So Allah give us tawfiq to revive this lost sunnah, because I mentioned in another class that the one who revives the lost sunnah, that they get the reward of, in one narration, 70 shuhada, 100 shuhada, or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they get the reward of many, many shuhada. And this definitely is a lost sunnah, this not wasting food, subhanAllah. One of our teachers actually came to have a meal with my family, one of the Zaytuna teachers, many, many years ago. And subhanAllah, when him and his wife came, and when he finished his food, there was nothing on his plate. And I was like, subhanAllah, I'm really glad people are around, and I hope they noticed that. It was just incredible. You could have seen your face in that plate. It was so clean, subhanAllah. Okay, haram to drink from vessels of gold and silver. Okay, so here I just made, this is from Mukhtasar Khalil. Is this readable? Inshallah, this is readable. So again, Mukhtasar Khalil is the fatwa book. Do you mean put something on your eyes? Yes, if something, a piece of bread falls, to actually put it to kiss it and then put it to your eyes, just out of reverence for it. And there's a hadith that mentions the Prophet ﷺ doing that. So, okay, so what's the ruling? A lot of times we'll get this question. Okay, so containers of pure gold and silver, they're prohibited to use. And then the other ones, there's, in Mukhtasar Khalil, he says there's two opinions, but I'll give a little bit more detail than this. So he said if it's plated, so if it's gold plated, meaning the outside is gold, and the inside is something else, there's two opinions. And then there's containers where the inside is gold and the outside is something else. Or there's the containers that have rings. For example, he gives the example of, for example, if you have a mirror, because you wouldn't use a mirror either that is gold plated. So it could have a ring around it, things like that. He says those kinds of things, they'll have all these containers, because they're mixed, they'll have two opinions. What we were taught is if the asl, if the basis, so if the inside, right, the core is what always matters. It's the heart of the matter. So if the inside is gold or silver, then what Sheikh Sadiq had told us is the stronger opinion is that it's not permissible. If the core is gold or silver, then the stronger opinion that it's not permissible to use. But if the core is something else and the outside is plated, right? What we'll say this is gold plated, silver plated, then the stronger opinion, and Allah knows best, is that it's permitted. Or containers with rings. So Mukhtasar Khalil, he has a long, they have in the commentary, they actually go into a lot of detail about these containers that are not purely gold or silver, and the commentary and the reason they're not permissible. And but so I just wanted to give summarize it. And then that last, all the way on the right, containers with precious stones. Also in Khalil, he says there's two opinions about whether they're permissible or not to use. We usually don't have those, but I think more the fitna is these ones. But he mentions that too. What is the ruling of a container that's made of precious stones? So that has two opinions. Inshallah, this is clear. Maybe we can have one more slide. Okay, I wanted to mention this because especially in Ramadan, this is a huge fitna. It's not permitted, and Sheikh Sadiq was very strict about this. He does mention two opinions in here. What we were taught is if you have your clothes smell, people will eat and their clothes will smell, you don't go to the masjid. And by the way, tashwish ala al-musalli haram. Disturbing the person who's praying, whether it's with your smell or whether it's with I'll change the color, or whether it's with your scent, it's not permitted. So he says going to the masjid, it's either makruh or haram if you're entering after eating anything foul. And the Prophet ﷺ, this was not permitted for him to eat these foul smelling foods. And this is fresh garlic or fresh onions. If it's cooked, it's different because the smell goes away. People, if you're going to go to the masjid, just be careful about, where you've been, because there might be a smell lingering on your clothes. And I actually have a very strong smell, and I can smell that. I'm around children, sometimes unfortunately they're from the subcontinent, and I can smell the food on their clothes, the spices and stuff. So, and tashwish ala al-musalli haram, and disturbing the person who's praying, and that's wherever they are. I mean, certainly going to the masjid stinky, one has to be really careful, and people are praying, that's not permitted. So speaking and people are praying, that's not permitted. I mean, people should not be praying in an area where people are going to be walking in and out, and one shouldn't pray like in front of a door and things like that. One shouldn't block people's passageway, and he'll go over that. Inshallah, when we do the section on prayer, we'll go over that. But likewise, speaking and people are praying. One of the shuyukh, he was giving a dars in Syria, and it was in the masjid, and the majlis was full of people. So he came and did the tahiyatul masjid. I think in the Malikis, it's a confirmed sunnah to do that before you sit down, to give the two greeting. Do the 2 rak'ah of greeting the masjid, because you're greeting the owner of the house. So it's tahiyatul masjid, but you're really greeting the owner of the house, Allah Ta'ala. So you're supposed to do that before you sit down. So if somebody comes to the masjid and they're praying, whatever prayer they're doing, you can't speak loud enough to where they'd be disturbed by it. And that's anywhere. But certainly, the adab of the masjid are greater than and more than the adab in the house. And so usually if people are praying, anyway, sorry, going back to the story. So this this brother came, he started doing the Tahiyatul Masjid. And the Shaykh was upset because he said, I have to stop my dars now because you're praying. Because he knew his fiqh, that he certainly was not going to do the haram and disturb the person who was praying. So he didn't want people, it's bad adab, you come late to the class and you want to do Tahiyatul Masjid. So either do it in another area of the masjid or don't come to the class. And anyway, so, okay, and then the other things we mentioned here in these bullets, discourage or makruh to eat leaning. So it's makruh to eat leaning. I didn't mention this. So if you go to somebody's house, so not only leaning on one's elbows, but leaning to where you're leaning on a chair. So I try to sit forward if I'm eating on a chair. Just sit forward so one isn't considered as leaning against something. So, and this is mentioned, the Prophet mentioned that he wouldn't eat muttaki'an. Ittika, so muttaki'an, leaning against something. So try to, whether on elbows or anything like that. We mentioned barakah descends onto the center. If food bought with another share equally because it's mutual property. SubhanAllah, Islam, it's just perfect justice. If hands are clean, then it's not a sunnah to wash specifically for eating necessarily. So if someone doesn't wash their hands, SubhanAllah, they mentioned, SubhanAllah, every little thing because there were people who wanted to know the sunnah for everything. Some people might say, well, why is this important? Because there are people who had so much love for the Prophet ﷺ, they would want to know, what should I do? Okay, my hands really aren't dirty. Should I wash them? And so it's not necessarily a sunnah if they're not, if they're clean. So if, like the Prophet ﷺ, he wiped his hands, they had oil on them, and he wiped his hand on his feet, so then his feet would be, and they say his feet were soft, subhanAllah. And he oiled them, subhanAllah. So that is basically the section on eating and drinking. The one thing I mentioned, I think that's important to mention. How many sections? Okay, so this is the last. If it's okay, I'm going to go a little bit over. I'm going to change the color of this slide too. If you drink milk or anything containing fat, then it's sunnah to rinse the mouth before praying. Otherwise, it's recommended. Meaning if you're not going to the prayer. SubhanAllah, somebody asked me, they were going to the prayer, and after sometimes you break your fast and you'll quickly go and pray. And you don't want to have food in your mouth because the angels don't really like that. But if it's not something fatty you've eaten, I mean, technically, if somebody didn't rinse their mouth, as far as I know, it's not makruh, Allahu alam. So, but if you drank milk or anything that had fat in it, then it would be sunnah to rinse your mouth before going to pray. If you're not going to pray, then it'd be recommended to rinse your mouth if you ate something fat that had fat in it. It's makruh or permitted, there's difference of opinion, to wash or clean your hands with food or skin of food. And subhanAllah, somebody might find this strange, but we grew up where, I would see people they would eat fruit after their meals, which is not really recommended in Lib. They say you should eat fruit either on its own, or if you're going to eat it with a meal, eat the fruit first. Because apparently fruit gets digested very quickly, and so you want to eat it first. So it goes through your system first. Otherwise, it kind of sits there with other food that actually is slower to digest. I would see people using the peels of tangerines and the like to clean their hands. So I wouldn't do that. And then he ends, subhanAllah, with the ruling on walima, he said it's wajib to attend a walima unless there's secondary factors. So if you've been invited to a walima, this is a wedding, invitation where they invite you to food after the wedding has been consummated. It's mandatory to attend that unless there's things like there's mixing of genders, if they're going to be playing music, things like that. Then you're excused from that. Then you wouldn't go. And also one couldn't go to a walima if one has not been invited. And Imam Malik was, he gave the dispensation because people didn't want to go to, they may not want to go to some of these gatherings, but then if it's wajib, they would want to go. So Imam Malik gave the rukhsa. وقد أرخص مالك رحمه الله في التخلف عن الإجابة لوليمة العرس لكثرة الزحام الناس فيها. So Imam Malik gave the rukhsa. Arkhasa means he gave the rukhsa. في التخلف. Takhalluf means to not go, to sit back. عن الإجابة لوليمة العرس. It's the walima of the wedding, right? The wedding party. If there's a lot of crowding, like if you're going to go and the place is really crowded, because that's a difficulty. So Imam Malik gave the dispensation that if there's going to be a lot of people there, لأن في حضورها حينئذ مشقة. Because in going to these gatherings, there's a lot of crowd, there's a difficulty. لا سيما على أهل الفضل والصلاح. Especially, لا سيما, you'll hear this a lot. لا سيما means especially, particularly, خاصة, particularly for the people of fadl, of virtue, and salah, of righteousness. They find it difficult if there's a crowd. They don't want to impose on anyone. They don't want to, you don't want to push people. You don't want to, you're kind of going, oops, excuse me, sorry. It's a difficulty. So Imam Malik gave the rukhsa to people that if it's crowded, then one doesn't have to attend a walima. And that is the end of what I have for the section. So that's chapter 45 summed up in the slides of the Risālah of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, unless there's any other questions. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma hu ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma hu ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina sallallahu ma hu ahlu. So it's khilaf. It's either makruh or permitted. There's differences of opinion. That's why I mentioned both. So I wouldn't do it because some of the scholars would consider it makruh to clean in general with any food. I saw people doing it with like orange peels and things like that. Maybe if they're getting thrown away, Allahu alam, and there's no benefit to them and they're not getting used as food, Allahu alam, but he says the skin of food also. So, inshallah. So that's the end of our second class. Inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. So inshallah the sound was better. Alhamdulillah, I'm using a mic today.